And welcome to Long Live the Queen, where we talk about the women who made history. And by we, I mean the royal we, because it's just me. Today, we're talking about Maguerite of Angouleme. Born on April 11, 1492, Maguerite of Angouleme entered a world of velvet gowns and ruthless ambition. Her father, Charles of Angouleme, was a dashing but distant second prince in the Valois-Orléans line, while her mother, Louise of Savoy, was a schemer, with eyes glittering like the French crown itself. Louise dreamed of her children ruling, but when Marguerite arrived, a mere girl, she was dismissed with a flick of the wrist. Thank you, next. But fate had other plans for this sharp-minded daughter. At 2, Marguerite welcomed a brother, Francis, on September 12, 1494, a golden-haired heir to carry the Valois-Angouleme hopes. But joy turned to ashes when their father succumbed to illness, likely tuberculosis, in 1496 at the age of 44, leaving toddling Francis as second prince of the blood. The court whispered of natural causes, but Louise's steely gaze was already fixed on the throne. 2 years later, in 1498, King Charles VIII's sudden death without heirs sent shockwaves through France. The crown passed to Louis of Orléans, now Louis XII, and 4-year-old Francis became the first prince of the blood. Louise, ever the chess master, practically danced with glee. Her son was one heartbeat from the throne, specifically Louis XII's heartbeat. Louis XII, childless, after a 24-year marriage to Joan of France, moved swiftly to annul it, casting Joan aside in a humiliating spectacle that drove her to a convent. He wed Anne of Brittany, widow of the late king, in a desperate bid for a male heir. Louise watched, hawk-like, praying Anne's womb would yield only daughters. When Anne birthed Claude in 1499, followed by a string of stillbirths and miscarriages, Louise's hopes soared. She betrothed her son Francis to Claude, cementing his claim. In a move straight from the Tudor playbook, Henry VII had done the exact same thing just 15 years prior with Elizabeth of York. Meanwhile, Marguerite, a precocious teen, was married off in 1509 at 16 or 17 to Charles IV, Duke of Alençon, a lesser Valois scion. It was no fairy tale romance. The marriage was a cold political contract, and Marguerite, her heart unswayed, buried herself in her books and pious works, barely acknowledging her husband's existence. Their union remained childless, a silent testament to her indifference. As France held its breath for Anne of Brittany's next child, hoping for a male heir to displace Francis, Marguerite's world buzzed with possibility. In 1512, Anne delivered another girl, Renée, and Louise's ambitions burned brighter. Francis wed Claude in 1514, a union that promised to secure his path to the throne, but tragedy struck in 1515 when Anne died, exhausted by her fruitless quest for a son. Louis XII, now 52, wasted no time. He married 18-year-old Mary Tudor, Henry VIII's vivacious sister, in a whirlwind that set the court alight. For a fleeting moment, the French court was a dazzling carousel of youth. Mary, with her Tudor charm, befriended Marguerite, Francis, and Claude, while 2 English sisters, Anne and Mary Boleyn, added their own sparkle to the scene. Marguerite, now in her early 20s, found a kindred spirit in the bookish Anne Boleyn, their late-night talks crackling with ideas about faith and reform. But the revelry ended abruptly when Louis XII died in 1515, mere months after his marriage. Mary Tudor, childless, eloped with Charles Brandon and fled to England, leaving the French court reeling. Francis, Marguerite's brother, ascended as King Francis I. Because the king is dead, long live the king. At 23, he was a Renaissance prince in all his glory, charismatic, ambitious, and ready to reshape Europe. Marguerite, now a royal sister, stepped into the spotlight, her intellect and charm illuminating the court. With Francis on the throne, Marguerite became a confidant and cultural beacon. Anne Boleyn, serving Queen Claude, grew closer to Marguerite, their shared love of learning and forging a bond that whispered of reformation. Marguerite's Protestant sympathies were daring, even dangerous, in a Catholic stronghold. She devoured heretical text, her questions about faith sparking ideas that would later ripple through Anne's life and, through her, to England's future Queen Elizabeth I. In 1519, the court welcomed a luminary, Leonardo da Vinci, the aging genius, invited by Francis to inspire a new age of science and art. Marguerite, 27, and Anne, 18, likely sat rapt as he spoke of invention and inquiry. His death on May 2, 1519, must have struck like a thunderbolt. For Marguerite, a woman who had lived for knowledge, losing this titan was a wound that shaped her resolve to champion learning. Queen Claude, meanwhile, bore children at a relentless pace, securing the throne with sons and daughters. But her body paid the price, and in 1524, at just 24 years old, she died, possibly from a miscarriage or sheer exhaustion. Marguerite mourned her sister-in-law, whose gentle presence had steadied the court. The winds of war soon swept through. In 1525, Francis, and Marguerite's husband Charles of Alençon, marched against the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. Disaster struck. Francis was captured, and Charles returned home to a frosty Marguerite. She blamed him for her brother's fate. And when Charles died 2 months later, whispers swirled that shame, or perhaps a broken heart, had claimed him. Marguerite, widowed at 33, stood alone, but unbowed. Louise of Savoy, ever the fierce matriarch, negotiated Francis's release, but the cost was staggering. Her grandsons, Francis and Henri, aged 8 and 7, were sent as hostages to Spain. Marguerite's heart must have shattered as she watched her nephews, mere children, ride into captivity. In 1527, Marguerite married again, this time to Henry II of Navarre, a king whose small realm, nestled in the Pyrenees, more of a partnership than her first, demanded heirs. At 36, Margaret gave birth to Jeanne in 1528, a daughter who would carry her legacy. In 1530, a son, Jean, arrived. But his death at 5 months old left Marguerite, nearing 39, with no more children to give. The loss, coupled with her mother Louise's death in 1531, at 55, plunged her into grief, yet her spirit burned brighter. In 1531, Marguerite penned The Mirror of the Sinful Soul, a poetic meditation on faith and redemption. The Catholic Church branded it heretical, but Marguerite, ever defiant, tossed her head and continued writing. By 1540, the candlelit quiet of Château d'Amboise, she began her magnum opus, the Heptameron. Inspired by the Decameron, it wove 67 tales of love, betrayal, and morality, told by stranded travelers. Each story pulsed with wit and witticism, giving voice to women in a world that sought to silence them. Marguerite's quill danced, her words a rebellion against the constraints of her time. As queen, diplomat, and patron, she juggled courtly duties with her literary passion, hosting poets and scholars who fueled her creativity. Her Protestant leanings grew bolder, making her a target of Catholic ire, yet her brother's protection shielded her. Barely. Now let's talk about Marguerite's spiritual life. She wasn't just dipping her toes in reformist waters. She was practically diving in headfirst. In a France where Catholic orthodoxy ruled with an iron grip, Marguerite's Protestant leanings were like tossing a torch into a powder keg. She didn't just read heretical text. She devoured them, her mind buzzing with questions about faith, grace, and a church that seemed more obsessed with power than salvation. Her court in Navarre? Oh, it was a full-on sanctuary for the reformers, a glittering hub dubbed the Navarre Network by historians, a who's who of bold thinkers, translating scripture to make priests sweat. There were even whispers of John Calvin's ideas floating through the candlelit halls. Marguerite didn't just host these rebels, she shielded them, her royal status of velvet glove protecting their dangerous ideas. It wasn't just a book club with extra wine, it was a quiet revolution. Marguerite walked a tightrope, never fully breaking with Catholicism, but pushing for a reformed faith that spoke to the soul. Her court became a beacon for those who dreamed of a church stripped of its gilded corruption, and her influence rippled far beyond Navarre. Those late-night talks with Anne Boleyn, they weren't just gossip sessions. They were planting seeds of reformation that would bloom in England's break with Rome. Marguerite was the spark, the queen, who turned her little Pyrenees kingdom into a hotspot for ideas that shook thrones. In 1541, Marguerite arranged for a marriage for her daughter Jeanne to William of Cleves, the brother of Anne of Cleves, Henry VIII's fleeting queen. The union was a disaster. Jeanne, forced into it, refused consummation, and the marriage was annulled in 1545, but it still lasted longer than Anna and Henry VIII's marriage. Marguerite's heart ached for her daughter, but she pressed on, her influence crossing borders. In 1544, Princess Elizabeth of England, Anne Boleyn's daughter, translated The Mirror of the Sinful Soul as a gift for her stepmother, Catherine Parr. The echo of Marguerite's bond with Anne resonated in her daughter's work, a poetic thread linking past and present. The deaths of Henry VIII and Francis I in 1547 marked the end of an era. Marguerite, now 55, felt the weight of time. In 1548, Jeanne married Antoine de Bourbon, a prince whose lineage made him first in line if Francis's line faltered. Their son Henry would become King Henry IV of France, ensuring Marguerite's bloodline would reign. In December 1549, Marguerite fell ill, her strength fading like a winter sunset. On December 21, at 57, she slipped away, her quill stilled but her legacy ablaze. The Heptameron, though unfinished, became a beacon of Renaissance humanism, its feminine perspective immortalizing her voice. What did you think about Maguerite of Angouleme? You can share your thoughts with me at longlivethequeenpodcast@gmail.com, slide into my DMs on Facebook or Instagram at longlivethequeenpodcast, or join the Royal Court on Patreon for extended episodes and bonus content. On Thursdays, we compare Game of Thrones characters to IRL history. Long live to all the queens out there. And until next time, bye.
You'll be remembered.
Thanks for listening.